Okay. So thank you so much, everybody, for showing up today for the last Joy of Eating meeting of 2021 with the topic of food and mood, how what we eat affects how we feel. And before I start talking about this important topic, a little disclaimer I'd like to give that the information on this presentation is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. All content is for general information and education purposes only. So let's start defining what is mental health and mental illness so we can have a foundation to understand why it's so important to address this topic. So mental health is defined as everything that affects how we feel, how we think, and how we behave in relation to be effective in our productive activities involving work, school, hobbies, household duties. Also, our relationships, to have healthy relationships and ability to adapt to change and cope with adversity. So if you have good mental health, we should be able to handle those things effectively and efficiently. But once we develop mental illness, is when any of those three components, feelings, thoughts, or behavior, are off balance, either isolated or any combination of those three that can affect those major areas of life. So that's the definition of mental health and mental illness. What kind of impact can we see? The statistics show that the rates of depression in the last couple of years have really skyrocketed. So before the pandemic, we had the rate of depression of 8.5% among adults. And currently, the estimates show 32.8%. So it's a huge, huge growth. And we have some obvious influences, from the pandemic, fear of dying, loss of loved ones, loss of income for many people. But one of the things that is not much talked about is that lifestyle has changed as well. So people have become less active, and people are now consuming less fruits and vegetables, especially during quarantine. So those are two things that I believe have had a big impact on this increase in depression and mental illnesses. So why is it important to look at strategies to prevent, manage, or reverse mental illnesses? So depression and anxiety are the two top conditions affecting mental, the two top common mental illnesses in the US, with depression being the leading cause of poor health and disability worldwide, according to the World Health Organization. These two conditions can lead to an increased risk of developing cardiovascular disease, other mental health disorders, increased risk of developing type 2 diabetes, substance abuse, social isolation, chronic pain, headache, insomnia, problems functioning at work, at school or work, digestive or bowel problems, overall poor quality of life, and increase the risk of suicide. So I think we have lots of reasons that this is something we need to fight, we need to prevent. And if any of us are suffering from this, we need to work on managing and possibly reversing this condition. So I have a poll question I'm gonna ask Angie to release this question. As you answer, make sure, be assured that we cannot see who is answering. This is just for us to see how the rate of these conditions affect a small sample, those of us who are here today. So Angie, whenever you're ready, you can release the question. Okay, so the question is, have you ever been diagnosed with depression or anxiety disorder?
And it looks like we have
the majority.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So surprisingly, it seems like depression and anxiety have only affected 14% of people in this group. So that's actually much, much better than the current rate in the US. So I'm happy to hear that. And you can release the second question as well. It's a follow-up question. So we have 14% that have been diagnosed with depression and anxiety. The second question, and that's just for those 14% that responded that have had these conditions at some point, do you still suffer from these conditions? About 20%. Okay. So hopefully after today's presentation, you should have some, ideas on how you can improve your mental health. And those of you who are not suffering from that, how we can prevent. Okay, so let's start with describing some of the harmful foods, nutrients, diet patterns, and other food-related substances. I came up with an acronym, the ABC of the harmful components, just because I noticed that I could fit into this acronym. Maybe there are other things out there that I did not mention, but I did a pretty extensive research to find out what are the most common food-related components that can impact mental health. So for the A, I came up with alcohol, which is something I'm probably talking to a group that doesn't struggle with that. But alcohol abuse and alcohol dependence have been associated with an increased risk for depression and other mental health conditions. And it goes both ways. Those who suffer from depression tend to have more of a propensity to suffer from alcohol-related problems as well. The other A goes for arachidonic acid, which is a substance that we can produce in our bodies from foods that have omega-6 fatty acids, which we need some. This is one of the essential nutrients. But if we consume too much omega-6 fatty acids, especially in the form of processed concentrated forms like corn oil, safflower oil, soybean oil, sunflower oil, cottonseed oil, or peanut oil, we can produce too much arachidonic acid. And arachidonic acid is a pro-inflammatory substance. So it tends to be related, it has been associated in studies with an increased risk for depression and anxiety. But we can also get arachidonic acid preformed if you consume animal foods, because those animals have also consumed foods that have omega-6 and their bodies have formed arachidonic acid. So especially if you eat, those individuals who eat meat, they are consuming the highest concentration of arachidonic acid. And I was looking at some of the statistics of the greatest contributors of arachidonic acid in terms of food consumptions, and chicken came as number one. So there's quite a bit of arachidonic acid from consuming chicken. Artificial sweeteners, there's not much studies looking at their impact on mental health. I actually found two, one from Canada, one from the US, both pointing to an association. So those are studies that cannot prove cause and effect, but they found that individuals that consume artificial sweeteners regularly, they had an increased prevalence of depression. Let's look at those for the letter B. I came up with bad diets for my letter B because I didn't want to mess up with my acronym. So bad diets for the letter B. The diets that have been reported as being detrimental to mental health are diets that are high in fat and sugar, because they can impair neurogenesis and have been associated with a higher prevalence of depression. Neurogenesis is when you form new neurons. So that's what the process is called. So the formation of new neurons is impaired in the presence of high fat and high sugar, especially if that's something that is occurring regularly. So that process is definitely impaired. Also, diets high in red and processed meats, refined grains, sweets, and high-fat dairy products have also been found to increase the risk of depression. So those are foods we want to stay away from. For C, There are two components here for C. One of them is caffeine. So scientific findings are a little bit mixed in terms of caffeine, but what I could find more, more of a strong relationship was the studies that point that adolescents' caffeine intake increase the predisposition to psychiatric disorders in adulthood, including anxiety disorders. And this remained true even if caffeine was discontinued by those individuals. So that's something that, the prevention, we know, can start much earlier in life. And, I was looking at, when does the caffeine intake has been presented to individuals, and I found the information that 75% of children 5 years or older consume caffeine on a daily basis. I have to say I was shocked by this information. I had no idea that 5-year-olds were consuming caffeine, but obviously may not even be in the form of coffee, maybe is sodas, right? Maybe is energy drinks. But nonetheless, the caffeine consumption is starting pretty early in life. Also, the studies point that heavy coffee drinking, those who consume 4 or more cups of coffee per day, that has been associated with anxiety, headache, restlessness, nausea, and increased blood pressure. And this is a summarized list. There are many other things that caffeine can impact our bodies, but this is just in the search that I was doing in relation to mental health. We also have cholesterol as something that can impact our brain function. The studies show that elevated LDL cholesterol, also the elevated ratio of LDL to HDL, and total cholesterol, all of these three have been associated to depression and its severity. So where do we get cholesterol from? We get cholesterol either preformed in foods from animal sources, because it takes a liver to make cholesterol, but also our own liver can make cholesterol out of saturated fat. So if we consume a diet that is high in saturated fats, that is going to impact our cholesterol levels as well. And these foods that are high in saturated fats have been presented in a previous presentation. You can look at the NAD website for a presentation I did earlier this year on the many faces of fat, and you can, review what are those foods. I also came up with another C for a pretty common food contaminant, mercury. Mercury is a heavy metal and it has toxic effects to the nervous system. And do you guys know which food is contaminated or tends to be more contaminated with mercury? If anybody wants to unmute or put on the chat. Fish, yeah. So the World Health Organization states that the predominant exposure to mercury occurs from fish and shellfish.
Amphiphilin.
Yeah, so seafood, okay? But it's interesting that some study actually relates the moderate consumption of fish has been associated with a lower odds of depression. So how can that be? If something that is toxic to the nervous system, well, when you actually look at the studies, they have what they call a U curve, or some of the studies a J curve. So in reality, they are looking at individuals that consume a omnivore diet, which has different types of meat, not just fish. So when those individuals lower the ratio of those meats and consume a little bit more fish, that increases the ratio of omega-3, which is an anti-inflammatory fat. So in that particular environment of, those who consume meats in general, increasing from just all meats to a little bit more fish than all meats combined, they have been lower odds of depression. But what is considered moderate consumption was about 0.7 ounces of fish per day. which translates to about 5 ounces of fish per week. So it's not as much as people think, because the studies also show when the intake of fish goes higher than this moderate consumption, then they see an increased risk of depression. So it's something just in the context for those who eat meat in general, trying to incorporate some fish seem helpful, but keep in mind that nearly all fish and shellfish contain traces of mercury, according to the FDA. So when they took a group, there was a clinical trial that took a group of fish eaters and put them into a vegetarian diet for 2 weeks. They all reported improvements in their mood. So eating fish is beneficial. It seems to be beneficial just in the context of those who eat other meats, but abstaining from all meats, including fish, seems to be even better. So that's the message we have from this information. In terms of the references for all the statements I have, if you go to the article, you find all the references. I didn't include them here just for the sake of time, but you can find all the scientific references in the article that Angie already posted on the website. Switching gears to the helpful foods, nutrients, diet patterns, and other food-related substances. One of the things that have been observed is that those individuals that suffer from mental health conditions, they tend to be low in antioxidants. So increasing antioxidant-rich foods is one of the ways to help protect our brains and improve our mood, or improve mental illnesses. So I'm going to list all the antioxidants here: carotene, vitamin C, and I have all the foods listed here. So let me go back. So I don't know how I'm doing with time. I think I have another 14 minutes or so. So carotene tends to concentrate in yellow or orange fruits or vegetables and green leafy vegetables. So examples would be carrots, spinach, lettuce, tomatoes, sweet potatoes, broccoli, cantaloupe, and winter squash. And that nice characteristics of carotene is that is not easily destroyed by heat. So when you cook those vegetables, you're not destroying carotene. And some studies actually show that you may even enhance the absorption of carotene because it softens some of those cells to release, more of this nutrient. Next, we have vitamin C, which we can find in citrus fruits, kiwi, bell peppers, berries, cabbage. But if vitamin C is heat sensitive, so it will be destroyed, most of it, once you cook the foods that are rich in vitamin C. So even potatoes have a good amount of vitamin C, but because we eat potatoes cooked, most people I know eat potatoes cooked, so you would probably destroy most of the vitamin C. But if you want to keep, your intake high, just eat a good variety of fruits, and try to eat some of your vegetables raw instead of cooking everything. Vitamin E is another powerful antioxidant, concentrates in nuts and seeds. Then we have selenium, which is very concentrated in Brazil nuts. In fact, you only need 1 Brazil nut a day to give you all the selenium your body needs. So it's a very powerful source. Lycopene is found more in a more concentrated form in tomatoes. We have coenzyme Q10 is another antioxidant we get from whole grains, soybeans, broccoli, nuts and seeds. Then we have glutathione, which concentrates the most in mushrooms. And then we have broccoli as well, fruits and vegetables. We have polyphenols that are found in plants in general, but they tend to concentrate more in the skin of the plant. So that's where most of the polyphenols concentrate, because that's what the plant is using to also protect itself from any insects that is trying to, attack the plant. So that's why it concentrates more on the skin. So if you got anything that you tend to eat with the skin, if you can invest in organic, it's going to be better, because then also the pesticides would concentrate on the skin. So if you select organic options, you're decreasing your exposure to those pesticides. Then we have also L-theanine that has been reported as being low in individuals with depression. L-theanine tends to concentrate as an antioxidant, more particularly found in teas in general, but especially green tea. And if you try to avoid the caffeine component, you can select a decaffeinated green tea. Magnesium is a helpful, very helpful food nutrient, is a micronutrient. It is required for serotonin production, and serotonin is a neurotransmitter that is involved in the regulation of mood. So to make enough serotonin, one of the requirements is to have enough magnesium. The top food sources include pumpkin seeds, chia seeds, almonds, spinach, cashews, soy milk, black beans, peanut butter, and brown rice. Vitamin D, what has been observed is that low vitamin D concentration is associated with depression. So for more information on how to keep your vitamin D at good levels, refer to the article and presentation already that we did on nutrition considerations for vegetarians. Part 2, we are discussing vitamin D, okay? But obviously the sun is something that God gave us as a great resource to produce vitamin D, and also has been found to have a powerful effect in dealing with mental illnesses as well, because of the powerful light coming from the sun. Omega-3 fatty acids, the benefit from omega-3 is because they lower inflammation. And it has been observed that individuals that suffer from chronic conditions, mental illnesses included, they have a chronic low-grade inflammation. So when omega-3 is at a good level, it tends to lower this effect of this inflammation. So it helps to decrease the risk for depression, schizophrenia, and bipolar disorder, especially if you have omega-3 levels at a good normal range. So you want to make sure to consume this regularly, okay? The most common food that people think about in terms of omega-3 is probably fish, but because fish also comes with mercury, and we have traces of mercury in pretty much any kind of fish. So if we want to avoid that toxin, we want to probably seek omega-3 sources from plant foods. And that can be found in chia seeds, flax seeds, walnuts, and soybean products, or you can also get from algae-based supplements, which is algae is where the fish gets the omega-3 from anyway, so we're getting from the original source. So these are just some examples of some supplements that you could consider. St. John's wort extract, this has been studied in a recent meta-analysis involving 27 studies and over 3,000 participants. And they reported that this herbal nutraceutical can lead to similar improvements in depression as selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor medication, which is a very commonly prescribed antidepressant drug. So St. John's wort has been found to have a similar effect as this drug with fewer adverse events. It's low cost. So it's widely prescribed for depression in Europe, but some considerations in the US is that this herb is sold as a dietary supplement in this country, and the standards for supplements are less strict than the standards for prescription and over-the-counter drugs. In other words, the FDA does not oversee or regulate dietary supplements. So it's more of a hit and miss, to see if you're going to get something that is pure and that has the amount of extract that should be helpful. So it's something that we encourage you to discuss with your healthcare provider if you want to try. Okay, but keep in mind that you may need to try which supplements may or may not work. So look for medical advice on that. Tryptophan is an essential amino acid, is a precursor of serotonin synthesis. So you cannot form enough serotonin if you don't consume enough tryptophan. So there is evidence that a diet high in tryptophan may play an important role in lowering symptoms of depression, irritability, and anxiety. Oops, and I put it too quick. I was going to ask a question. What is the top food in terms of tryptophan? I was doing a search on the USDA food database, and I found the sea lions are the top source of tryptophan. Not that this information is helpful, because I don't think any of us would eat a sea lion, because it's, number one, an unclean meat, and it's a cute animal. So let's leave this animal alone, because there are other good sources out there. But I just found it interesting that they listed on the food database sea lions as a top source of tryptophan. But anyway, we have other good plant-based sources, including tofu. Tofu, you can get all the tryptophan you need in, 3 ounces of tofu. Obviously, most people are not going to consume tofu every day. So other good sources include gluten flour, black eyed peas, brown rice, almonds, pumpkin seeds, sesame seeds, almonds. Oh, I said almonds twice, sorry. Beans, lentils, and black walnuts. So make sure to consume tofu regularly. It's the best plant source of tryptophan. But more importantly, if some people were very caught up into looking for tryptophan from animal sources because it's more concentrated in meats, but is not as well absorbed, because when you consume tryptophan from animal sources, for the tryptophan to actually get to the brain, it needs to be transported. It has a way to be transported to cross the blood-brain barrier. And if you consume meat, you have a lot of other amino acids called neutral large amino acids that compete with this transportation into the brain. So tryptophan tends to be not as efficiently absorbed. So what the studies are showing, the diets that are higher in carbohydrates actually produce a better, it facilitates tryptophan to enter the brain. So that's why a plant-based diet is showing to be superior in terms of mental health. And there are many lifestyle modification interventions that when they focus on plant-based diets, they have demonstrated significant improvements in the mental health of individuals that experience moderate to severe depression and anxiety. So you guys are probably familiar with Dr. Neil Natalie program as one of them. So there are other programs out there using the same principles to implement a whole food plant-based diet. So these dietary patterns are characterized by a high intake of, oh, somebody's using their pointer and I don't know why it's affecting my screen. I don't know how to remove that. I'm not touching anything. Seems like Nola.
So
I don't know
Maggie,
how. Yes.
On the share option, let me see if I can do it here. I can do it. Got it.
Okay, thank you. I was like, what's going on? Aliens are invading my computer. So anyway, so these dietary patterns, keep in mind, is not just abstaining from meat, but it needs to be characterized by a high intake of fruits, vegetables, whole grains, nuts and seeds with limited processed foods. So we here have a plate demonstrating what a healthy plant-based meal would look like. Vitamin B6 also requires a cofactor for the process of conversion of tryptophan to serotonin. So we need to pay attention and consume good sources of vitamin B6. And that includes sweet bell peppers, that's the number one. Pistachios as number two. And then other foods that concentrate vitamin B6 from plant sources include shallots, dehydrated onions, parsley, sunflower seeds, leeks, chickpeas, prunes, chestnuts, walnuts, apricots, lima beans, brown rice, potatoes, figs, bananas, winter squash, and marinara sauce. So there is a huge variety of these healthy components for us to choose from. but we should be incorporating a variety of foods. Zinc, some research shows that individuals that have depression present lower levels of zinc. So zinc supplements may have an antidepressant-like and mood-enhancing capacity, both used as an alone treatment as well as an adjunct to conventional drug therapies. So the only thing is that some of the studies show that it may take up to 6 weeks for the individual to feel the effect of the zinc supplementation. So it's something that if you try, you should be consistent and not give up if you don't see any results. And for more information on how much zinc we need per day and what are the good levels, we have another presentation we did. So look for nutrition considerations for vegetarians, part 1. But in a nutshell, foods that concentrate protein will concentrate zinc as well. So you can get it from most, pulses, beans, lentils, peas, or you can get, you can supplement as well in addition, and this is a good brand if you're looking for a supplement. And just, towards the end, I like to also put, some spiritual application. So do we have any biblical evidence on the impact of food on the brain? I think, just looking from the perspective of good mental health, God has definitely created us, with that in mind, to have productive activities, to have healthy relationships. And after sin into the world, he wants us to have the ability to adapt to change and cope with adversity. So I'm sure we can all think of Bible characters that have portrayed those characteristics. Above all, Jesus Christ, the foundation of, everything that is good. He definitely portrayed, what good mental health looks like. But I was thinking of the famous story on Daniel 1, in which those 4 individuals followed a whole food plant-based diet, and they were tested for 10 days compared to those in Babylon eating the traditional Babylonian diet that we know for sure included meats and included alcohol. And the group of Daniel and his 3 friends were consuming only fruits, vegetables, whole grains, beans, and as a beverage, only water. And at the end of the 10 days, in all matters of wisdom and understanding, the king inquired of them, he found them 10 times better. So I haven't found any other studies, in modern science that have such outstanding results. So I would say, those results are not just from the food, they ate, obviously, because of their relationship with the Lord, and all their lifestyle habits they practice. But it's a good, biblical evidence to support the impact of food on the brain. And if you follow their lives, throughout the book of Daniel, you can see, how these individuals had productive lives. They're all involved, in politics, in governing Babylon. They were all invited to have important, positions in the kingdom. They had healthy relationships with men and with God. And for sure, they had the ability to adapt to change, a major change, even being brought as captives to Babylon and cope with all sorts of adversity, including, death decrees that they had to face. So as people that are waiting for Jesus' soon return, we definitely need to have those, a sharp mental health so we be able to endure, similar experiences too. So diet is just a piece of the puzzle, it's just the topic I wanted to finish this year's presentation with. But keep in mind, a healthy lifestyle involves much more than that. I think you guys all know. So some other resources, to continue to give, ongoing support. I highly recommend those books, The Ministry of Healing, Counsels on Diet and Foods, Depression, the way out, and you can look for them online. Also, Dr. Neil Nedley has a very good website with, some resources and information on his residential program. So you can visit his website. And also, I think at some point, Angel's going to share the link for the survey so you can share your thoughts with us.